I don't care what you're offering, Ms. Hart. The answer is no. Sienna Hart, youngest billionaire CEO in Boston's cutthroat investment world, had never been told no. Not by competitors, not by politicians, not by anyone who understood what her interests could do for a career. But Ethan Cole said it every single time, turning down promotions, rejecting private dinners, walking out of her office at exactly 5:30 p.m. like she didn't exist. Tonight, she'd finally demanded the truth, and what he told her would destroy everything she thought she understood about power. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The glass walls of Hart Capital's 52nd floor offered a view of Boston that most people would never see. The city spread out like a circuit board beneath winter clouds, the Charles River frozen into stillness, the financial district glittering with ambition and desperation in equal measure. Sienna Hart stood at those windows every morning at 6:15 a.m., coffee in hand, watching the sun fail to break through the February gloom. She liked it better this way. The cold, the gray, it matched the work. At 30 years old, Sienna had built an empire that older men with decades of experience couldn't touch. Hart Capital managed $14 billion in assets. She'd made her first million at 23, her first $100 million at 27, and by the time she hit 30, Forbes had stopped calling her a prodigy and started calling her a threat. She'd earned every inch of it. No family money, no connections. Just a brain that processed market patterns like poetry and a work ethic that turned 80-hour weeks into baseline expectations. The office reflected her precisely. Everything was clean lines and controlled temperature, white marble, chrome fixtures, not a single photograph or personal item anywhere. Her desk was a slab of reclaimed steel that had once been part of a demolished factory. She'd paid $15,000 for it because she liked the metaphor. The chairs in her conference room cost more than most people's monthly rent, designed by some Scandinavian minimalist whose name she could never remember. People called the space intimidating. Sienna called it efficient. She turned from the window as her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Miss Hart, the 7 a.m. is here." "Send them in." 3 executives filed in, each carrying tablets and the particular flavor of nervousness that came from presenting quarterly projections to someone who could spot a lie in a spreadsheet from across the room. Sienna didn't sit. She never sat for these meetings. It kept them short. "Talk to me about Singapore." The senior VP, a man named Kellerman, who'd been with the company for 8 years, pulled up a chart. "We're tracking above forecast by 11%. The infrastructure play is paying off exactly as you predicted. And the currency hedges? Solid. We're insulated even if the dollar strengthens." Sienna nodded, her eyes already moving to the next column of data. "Tokyo?" "Different story." This was Michelle Park, their Asia-Pacific director. "We're down 4%. The retail sector isn't rebounding the way we anticipated." "Why not?" "Consumer confidence is—" "I didn't ask for the textbook answer, Michelle. I asked why our models were wrong." Michelle's jaw tightened. "Our analysts didn't factor in the demographic shift strongly enough. Aging population, declining birth rate. It's accelerating faster than the government data suggested." "Which analyst?" "Cole ran those numbers." Sienna's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. "Is he in today?" "Yes, at his desk. Have him in my office at 8:30. Alone." She turned back to Kellerman. "What else?" The meeting lasted 12 more minutes. Sienna approved 2 acquisitions, killed 1 merger, and reassigned a portfolio manager who'd been underperforming for 3 quarters. By 7:45, her office was empty again, except for the faint smell of expensive cologne and fear. She stood at the window and thought about Ethan Cole. That was the problem, actually. She thought about Ethan Cole entirely too much. He'd been hired 14 months ago, brought in from a smaller firm by their head of analytics who'd called him the best pattern recognition specialist I've ever seen. The job offer had been generous. $240,000 a year, full benefits, profit sharing, the works. For a 32-year-old analyst, it was exceptional compensation. Ethan had negotiated exactly one thing. He needed to leave every day at 5:30 p.m., no exceptions. Most candidates asked for more money or better titles. Ethan Cole asked for time. Sienna had found it odd, but not concerning. Plenty of people had lives outside the office. Even if she didn't understand the appeal, she'd approved the hire and forgot about it. Then she'd actually met him. It happened 3 weeks into his tenure. She'd been walking through the analytics floor heading to a meeting when she'd glanced at a workstation and stopped mid-stride. The screen showed a market projection model that was unlike anything she'd seen from her team before. It was factoring in variables that weren't even in their standard data sets. Whose work is this? Her head of analytics, a brilliant but socially awkward man named Derek Chen, had looked up. Oh, that's Cole. He came up with a new approach to emerging market volatility. It's pretty wild, actually. He's treating political instability like weather patterns instead of discrete events. Sienna had studied the screens. The model was elegant. More than that, it was right in a way that standard analysis never quite achieved. I want to meet him. Derek had walked her over to a desk where a man sat with his back to them, headphones on, completely absorbed in his work. Derek tapped his shoulder. Ethan Cole had turned around, pulled off his headphones, and looked at Sienna with the kind of polite disinterest usually reserved for strangers on public transportation. Ethan, this is Ms. Hart. Nice to meet you. He'd shaken her hand, firm grip, no lingering, and waited. Sienna wasn't used to waiting. Derek tells me you've developed a new volatility model. Still testing it, not ready for implementation yet. Walk me through the theory. Now? Is there a better time? Ethan had glanced at his watch, an old Timex with a cracked face, and said, I've got about 40 minutes before I need to start wrapping up for the day. That work? Something in Sienna's chest had tightened. Not anger exactly, something more unfamiliar. 40 minutes is fine. For the next 37 minutes, Ethan had explained his model with a precision and clarity that impressed her despite herself. He wasn't trying to impress her. That was the strange part. He presented the work the same way someone might explain directions to a lost tourist, helpful, competent, but fundamentally neutral. When he finished, Sienna had said, This is excellent work. Have Derek add it to the next executive briefing. I want the team running scenarios with this by end of month. Sure. Anything else? She'd paused. You know who I am, right? Yeah, you're the CEO. That doesn't make you nervous? Ethan had given her a small, tired smile. Should it? Before she could answer, he'd glanced at his watch again and stood. Sorry, I need to get going. Was there something else you needed? It's 4:47. Takes me 43 minutes to get where I need to be. I don't like cutting it close. And he'd logged off his computer, grabbed a worn jacket from the back of his chair, and walked toward the elevator without a backward glance. Sienna had stood there in the middle of the analytics floor, surrounded by people who would have canceled their own weddings for 5 more minutes of her attention, watching Ethan Cole disappear into an elevator like she was nobody at all. That night, she'd looked up his file. Married, 1 child, no social media presence. Previous employer gave a glowing recommendation, but noted he'd refused a promotion to senior analyst because it would have required occasional late nights. Before that, he'd worked at a boutique firm in Cambridge doing climate data analysis. Master's degree from MIT. Undergrad from UMass. Nothing flashy, nothing that explained why someone that talented would deliberately limit his own trajectory. Over the next few months, Sienna had found excuses to interact with him. His models were consistently brilliant, so it wasn't hard to justify. She'd call him into meetings, ask him to present to the executive team, invite him to strategic planning sessions. Ethan was always professional, always punctual, and always gone by 5:30. When she'd offered him a promotion to senior analyst, a title bump, $60,000 more a year, a window office, he'd thanked her and declined. The role requires flexibility on hours, he'd said. I can't do that. We could make accommodations. I appreciate it, Ms. Hart, but the answer's no. She'd tried a different approach. There's a conference in Singapore next month. 3 days, all expenses paid. I'd like you to present your emerging markets work. It would be good exposure for you. I can't travel. It's Singapore, not exactly a hardship post. I'm sure it's great. I still can't go. The refusals had piled up. When other executives went out for drinks after work, Ethan went home. When the company held its annual gala, black tie, 5-star hotel, the kind of networking event that could make careers, Ethan sent his regrets. When Sienna had, In a moment of something she refused to call vulnerability, suggested coffee sometime to discuss his long-term career goals, Ethan had politely deflected. I'm good where I am, but thanks. Most people couldn't hide their hunger. They wanted something: money, power, access, approval. It leaked out in the way they laughed at her jokes, agreed with her opinions, angled for a few extra seconds of her time. Ethan Cole wanted nothing. It was driving her insane. She'd started noticing small things, the way his face was drawn with a kind of permanent exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to touch, how he never ate lunch in the cafeteria with the other analysts, preferring to work through it at his desk with whatever he'd brought from home in a plastic container. The fact that his clothes were good quality but worn, like he'd bought them years ago and was determined to get every mile out of them. Once, she'd overheard two analysts gossiping. Cole turned down the senior role again? Yep. Kellerman said he didn't even think about it. Just flat no. That's insane. Does he not like money? I heard his wife's sick or something. Maybe that's why he's always rushing out. Sienna had felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd pulled his file again that night. Marital status? Married. But no spouse information. No emergency contact except a care facility in Brookline. She'd left it alone for a while after that. It felt too much like prying. But the curiosity didn't fade. If anything, it got worse. 2 months ago, she'd invited the entire analytics team to dinner at Menton, her treat. A thank you for closing a major deal. Everyone had accepted except Ethan. Family commitment, he'd said. Bring your family. I can't, but thanks for the offer. Last month, she'd offered him tickets to a Bruins game. Luxury box. Impossible to get. I appreciate it, Ms. Hart, but I'm not really available for that kind of thing. 3 weeks ago, she'd asked him directly, Do you not like working here? Ethan had looked up from his computer, genuinely surprised. What? No, this is a great job. Then why won't you ever say yes to anything? Because I'm here to work, and I do that. Everything else? He'd shrugged. It's not personal. But it felt personal. It felt like rejection in a way Sienna hadn't experienced since high school, when she'd been the scholarship kid at a private school full of old money and older prejudices. Now, standing at her window at 8:25 a.m., waiting for Ethan to arrive for a meeting he didn't know was about to become an interrogation, Sienna tried to examine why she cared so much. The honest answer was uncomfortable. Ethan Cole didn't treat her like she was special. Everyone else bent. He didn't. And somewhere in her obsessively competitive brain, that had transformed from an annoyance into a challenge, into something she didn't have a word for. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Cole is here. Send him in. Ethan walked in dressed the way he always was. Neat, but not expensive. Dark pants, blue button-down, no tie. He had the kind of face that would have been handsome if it weren't so tired. Dark hair starting to show gray at the temples. Brown eyes that were sharp when looking at data and distant everywhere else. You wanted to see me? Sienna gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit. He sat. Didn't fidget. Just waited. The Tokyo numbers were off. Yeah, I know. That's not like you. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. I missed a variable. It happens. Does it? Apparently. Sienna leaned back against her desk, arms crossed. You're the best analyst I have. You don't miss things. So what happened? I got it wrong. I'll do better next time. That's not an answer. For the first time, something flickered across Ethan's face. Irritation, maybe, or exhaustion reaching a breaking point. With respect, Ms. Hart, I made a mistake. I'm not sure what else you want me to say. I want you to tell me why someone as talented as you is content to stay in a mid-level position, refusing every opportunity that comes your way. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Is this about the Tokyo analysis or something else? It's about you wasting your potential. I'm not wasting anything. You turned down senior analyst, twice, because I don't want it. Why not? That's personal. Sienna felt her temper flare. You know what your problem is, Cole? You act like you're above all of this, like ambition is beneath you. Ethan stood up. I think we're done here. Sit down. I'm not finished. Yeah, you are. His voice was quiet, but something in it made Sienna stop cold. I do my job. I do it well. What I do with the rest of my time is none of your business. When it affects your work, it becomes my business. One mistake in 14 months. That's your evidence that my personal life is affecting my work? Ethan shook his head. This isn't about Tokyo. You want to know why I won't have drinks with the team or go to your galas or take your coffee meetings? That's what this is really about. Sienna's face went hot. That's not, I have a daughter. The words came out flat, hard. She's 5 years old. Every evening at 5:30 I leave here and I go to her because she needs me. That's why I turn down promotions that require late nights. That's why I don't travel. That's why I'm not interested in networking events or career development or any of the other things you think I should want, because none of it matters as much as being there for her. The office went silent. Sienna felt something crack open in her chest, part shame, part something else she couldn't name. I didn't know you had a daughter. You didn't ask. My file says I'm married. I was. She died 3 years ago. Ethan's voice didn't change, but his hands curled into fists at his sides. Car accident, black ice. I've got a kid who needs me to show up every single day, so that's what I do. I don't need a bigger office or a better title or whatever it is you think success looks like. I need to leave at 5:30 and get to Brookline before visiting hours end. That's it. That's the whole story. Sienna couldn't speak. Every response that came to mind felt inadequate. Ethan moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I like working here. You run a good company, but I'm not going to apologize for having priorities that don't start and end with Hart Capital. He left before she could find words. Sienna stood alone in her office, staring at the space where he'd been, feeling like she'd just stepped on a landmine she hadn't known was there. A daughter. A dead wife. A man who left at 5:30, not because he didn't care about his career, but because he cared about something more. She walked back to the window. Boston sprawled below, indifferent and frozen. Somewhere out there was Brookline. Somewhere in Brookline was a little girl waiting for her father, and Sienna realized she didn't know the first thing about Ethan Cole. That thought should have been enough to make her let it go. She'd crossed a line. He'd drawn a boundary. The professional thing to do would be to respect it and move on. But Sienna Hart hadn't built an empire by respecting boundaries. That night, she made a phone call. The investigator's name was Lauren Voss, and she'd worked with Hart Capital before on due diligence for acquisitions. Discreet, thorough, and expensive enough that she didn't ask questions about why a CEO wanted a background check on her own employee. Keep it quiet, Sienna said, and I want everything. How deep? Deep enough to understand him. The report arrived 4 days later in a sealed envelope. Sienna opened it at midnight in her apartment, a glass of wine going warm on the coffee table beside her. The first page was basic information she already knew. Ethan Michael Cole, born in Worcester, MIT graduate, married to Jenna Reeves in 2019. Then the timeline started. June 2019, married, October 2020, daughter, Rosalie. Jane Cole, born January 2023, car accident. The accident report was attached. Sienna read it twice, feeling sick. Jenna Cole had been driving home from a late shift at Mass General Hospital where she worked as a nurse. The roads were icy. A truck ran a red light. The impact killed Jenna instantly. Rosalie, strapped in her car seat in the back, had survived. Technically. Traumatic brain injury, severe. The medical records were full of terms Sienna had to look up. Diffuse axonal injury, prolonged disorder of consciousness, minimally responsive state. For 3 years, Rosalie Cole had been in a care facility called Bright Horizons in Brookline. She could breathe on her own. Her eyes sometimes opened, but she didn't speak, didn't move with purpose, didn't respond to stimuli in any consistent way. The medical bills were catastrophic. Sienna flipped through the financial records, her chest getting tighter with each page. Ethan's salary from Hart Capital was good, but it was being devoured by care costs. Bright Horizons was one of the best long-term care facilities in the state, which meant it was ruinously expensive. Insurance covered some, but not nearly enough. He'd drained his savings in the first year. The second year, he'd sold the house he and Jenna had bought in Somerville, moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Alston, and poured every extra dollar into keeping Rosalie at Bright Horizons instead of moving her to a state facility. He'd been offered jobs with better pay, bigger bonuses. He'd turned them all down because they required flexibility he couldn't give. There were notes from the investigator at the end of the report. Subject visits care facility daily, 6 to 8:30 p.m. Spends time reading to patient, updating room decorations, coordinating with medical staff. Facility employees describe him as devoted. Medical team notes patient's condition has remained stable but unchanged for 36 months. Prognosis: unlikely to regain consciousness. Sienna closed the folder and sat in the dark for a long time. Ethan Cole wasn't sacrificing his career out of stubbornness or lack of ambition. He was sacrificing it for a little girl who couldn't even know he was there. Every evening at 5:30, he left the office and went to read to a daughter who might never hear him. He decorated her room for a child who couldn't see it. He paid bills that would crush anyone else, giving up everything: comfort, security, hope of a normal life, because he refused to let her go. It was the most devastating thing Sienna had ever heard, and it made every conversation she'd had with him feel like a wound she'd opened without knowing it was there. She thought about the coffee invitation she'd made, the conferences she'd pushed, the promotion she'd dangled like he was supposed to be grateful. How many times had she essentially asked him to choose his career over his daughter? The shame was physical, but underneath it, something else was growing. Not pity, Ethan would hate that. Something more complicated. A kind of awe at someone who could lose everything and still show up day after day for a child who existed in a space between life and death. Sienna had built an empire. She'd outthought, outworked, and outmaneuvered everyone who'd ever doubted her. She'd won at a game most people didn't even know how to play. And Ethan Cole had quietly made her feel small without ever trying. She picked up her phone and started typing a message, then stopped. What would she even say? I had you investigated and now I know your tragedy. That would go over well. For the first time in years, Sienna Hart didn't know what to do. The next morning, she went to the office early. At 8 a.m., she was standing at the window when her assistant buzzed. Miss Hart, there's a situation. What kind? Davidson's strategy just offered Ethan Cole a position. They came in at 3:20 with a signing bonus and flexible hours. Sienna's stomach dropped. When? He got the call yesterday. They want an answer by Friday. 3 days. Davidson's strategy was smaller than Hart Capital, but growing fast, and they'd been poaching talent for months. $320,000 was significantly more than Ethan made now, and flexible hours meant he could work around Rosalie's needs. He'd be insane not to take it. The thought of losing him sent something close to panic through Sienna's chest, which made no sense. He was an analyst, a good one, but replaceable. Except he wasn't. Not to her. Not anymore. She pulled out her phone and texted her assistant. I need Ethan Cole in my office. Now. 20 minutes later, he walked in looking wary. You wanted to see me? Sienna gestured to the chair. This time she sat too. I heard about Davidson's offer. Ethan's expression went carefully blank. Word travels fast. Are you taking it? I'm considering it. Don't. The word came out harder than she intended. I'll match it. 320 base plus equity options plus a signing bonus. And you can work whatever hours you need, remote when necessary, flexibility built into the contract. Ethan stared at her. Why? Because you're a valuable asset to this company. I've been a valuable asset for 14 months. This is the first time you've offered me any real flexibility. Sienna's jaw tightened. The situation has changed. What situation? Davidson's offer changed the market. That's not what I'm asking. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes sharp in a way she'd only seen when he was analyzing data. Why now? What changed between last week when you were interrogating me about ambition and today when you're suddenly offering me everything I asked for a year ago? Sienna felt the lie forming and killed it before it reached her mouth. She was many things, but she wasn't a coward. I had you investigated. The silence that followed was louder than shouting. Ethan's face went white, then red. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper. You did what? After our conversation, I wanted to understand. You invaded my privacy because you were curious? He stood up so fast the chair nearly tipped. What the hell is wrong with you? Ethan, do you have any idea? He stopped, his hands shaking. My daughter is in a care facility. My wife is dead. Those are the two worst things that have ever happened to me, and you turned them into research? Into data you could analyze? That's not how it was. Then how was it, Ms. Hart? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you couldn't handle the fact that I wasn't interested in you, so you dug into my trauma until you found a reason I was supposed to be flattered by. The accusation hit like a physical blow. That's not fair. Fair? Ethan laughed, bitter and sharp. You want to talk about fair? I come to work, I do my job. I don't ask for special treatment or sympathy or anything except the right to leave at 5:30 so I can read to my kid. And you respond by having me investigated like I'm some kind of security risk. I was trying to help. I don't want your help. His voice cracked. I don't want your money or your flexibility or whatever else you think you can throw at this to make it better. You took the worst thing in my life and treated it like a puzzle you needed to solve. That's not help. That's cruelty. Sienna felt tears stinging her eyes and hated herself for it. I made a mistake. Yeah, you did. Ethan moved towards the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I wasn't going to take Davidson's offer. I don't want to change jobs. I just want to be left alone to do my work and take care of my daughter. But I can't work for someone who thinks it's okay to violate my privacy the second I don't give them what they want. Ethan, please. I'll have my resignation on your desk by end of day. He walked out. Sienna sat in her office, staring at the door, feeling like she'd just set fire to something she didn't know how to rebuild. Outside the window, snow had started to fall. Ethan's resignation letter sat on Sienna's desk for 3 days. She read it once, then put it in a drawer and refused to touch it again. The words were professional, cold, exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd decided that working for you was worse than unemployment. He thanked her for the opportunity. He offered 2 weeks' notice. He didn't mention the investigation or the fight or anything that mattered. Sienna called an emergency meeting with HR on Thursday morning. I need you to reject this resignation. Patricia Huang, Hart Capital's head of human resources, looked at her like she'd suggested setting the building on fire. You can't reject a resignation. That's not how it works. Tell him we won't accept it until we've had a chance to discuss alternatives. Ms. Hart, if an employee wants to leave, they leave. We can make a counteroffer, but then make one. Whatever he wants. Name it. Patricia folded her hands on the conference table. She was one of the few people at Hart Capital who'd known Sienna long enough to speak without fear. What's really going on here? He's the best analyst we have. He's good. He's not irreplaceable. To me, he is. The silence stretched. Patricia's expression shifted from professional concern to something more personal. Sienna, be very careful about mixing business with whatever this is. It's not. Sienna stopped. The lie wouldn't come. I made a mistake, a bad one. I'm trying to fix it. Does fixing it require keeping him employed here, or does it require apologizing? I don't know. Patricia sighed. I can delay processing the resignation for a few days. Buy you some time. But if he wants out, you need to let him go. Gracefully. Sienna left the meeting feeling worse than when she'd entered. Back in her office, she pulled out the investigator's report again, hating herself for it, unable to stop. There were photographs included. The investigator had been thorough. One showed Ethan walking into Bright Horizons care facility, carrying what looked like a children's book and a grocery bag. Another showed him leaving 2.5 hours later, his face drawn with exhaustion. There was a shot of the facility itself, a converted Victorian house in a quiet Brookline neighborhood, the kind of place that cost money most people didn't have. Sienna found herself staring at a photo of Ethan standing at a window inside the facility. The angle was wrong to see what he was looking at, but his expression was visible. He looked like someone keeping vigil at the edge of the world. She closed the folder and picked up her phone. The text sat in her drafts for 20 minutes before she deleted it unsent. What could she possibly say that wouldn't make it worse? Friday came. Ethan didn't show up to work. Sienna told herself it was expected. He was probably using sick days, burning through his remaining PTO before the resignation took effect. But by noon, when Derek Chen mentioned that Ethan hadn't responded to any emails, something cold settled in her chest. She called his cell. It went straight to voicemail. By 3 p.m., she'd convinced herself something was wrong. By 4 p.m., she was in her car driving to Brookline. Bright Horizons sat on a tree-lined street that probably looked charming in summer. In February, with dirty snow piled along the curbs and the sky threatening more, it just looked cold. Sienna parked across the street and sat there for 10 minutes, trying to figure out what the hell she was doing. The smart move was to leave, go home, let Ethan quit, hire someone new, move on. She got out of the car. The lobby was warm and smelled faintly of lavender. A woman at the front desk looked up with the kind of professional smile that came from years of greeting people who were always having the worst day of their lives. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Ethan Cole." The smile faltered slightly. "Are you family?" "I'm his employer. Was his employer. I just need to speak with him briefly." The woman hesitated. "Mr. Cole is with his daughter right now. Visiting hours are until 8:30, but I'll wait." "Ma'am, I'm not sure. I'll wait in the lobby. I won't disturb anyone." There was something in Sienna's voice that made the woman reconsider. She nodded slowly. "There's coffee in the corner if you want it. It's terrible, but it's free." Sienna sat in a chair by the window and watched the light fade outside. Other visitors came and went. An elderly man with flowers. A young woman carrying a balloon. Each one looked like they were carrying something heavy that couldn't be seen. At 8:15, Ethan appeared. He walked down the hallway looking like he hadn't slept in days, a children's book tucked under one arm. When he saw Sienna, he stopped so abruptly the book nearly slipped. "What are you doing here?" Sienna stood. Her prepared speech evaporated. "I needed to see you." "You needed to—" Ethan's jaw worked. "You can't be here." "I know. I'm sorry. I just—" "No." He moved toward the exit, his whole body rigid. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up at the one place that's private, and I'm not here as your boss." "Then what are you here as?" The question came out raw. "Because you're not my friend. You made that clear when you had me investigated. So what is this?" People in the lobby were starting to stare. Sienna could feel their attention like heat. "Can we talk? Please. 5 minutes." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out the front door. Sienna followed. They stood on the sidewalk. Snow had started falling again, light and purposeless. 5 minutes, Ethan said. Sienna's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her coat pockets. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Apologize. I'm not good at it." "Then why are you here?" "Because I hurt you. And I need you to know that I know that. What I did was wrong, completely wrong. I violated your privacy because I was too arrogant to just accept that you weren't interested in the things I thought mattered. And I'm sorry." Ethan stared at the street. "Okay. Okay? You apologized. Is there something else?" "I don't want you to quit." "That's not your choice." "I know, but I'm asking anyway. Stay. I'll give you whatever terms you want. More money, full flexibility. I'll never speak to you outside of work if that's what it takes. Just don't leave because of me." Ethan turned to look at her. In the streetlight, his face was all shadows and exhaustion. "Why does it matter so much to you?" "Because you're the best analyst I have." "That's not why." Sienna felt something crack. "Because I don't want to lose you. You never had me." "I know." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "But the idea of you not being there, of having driven you away because I couldn't handle the fact that you treated me like I was just another person instead of someone special. It's eating me alive. And I know that's selfish. I know it's not your problem. But it's true." The snow fell between them. A car drove past, its headlights sweeping across them briefly. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. "I can't work for someone I don't trust. I understand. And I don't trust you. Not after what you did." "I know. So there's nothing to talk about." Sienna nodded. Her throat felt tight. "For what it's worth, the report is destroyed. I shredded it, and I fired the investigator. Not that it changes anything, but I need you to know I'm not keeping that information." "You already read it. The damage is done." "I know." Ethan looked back at the care facility. Lights glowed warm in the windows. "I need to go." "Wait, please." Sienna reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but if you change your mind about leaving, or if you need anything for Rosalie, this is my personal number, not the office line, just mine." He took the envelope like it might bite him. "I'm not going to call you." "I know. I mean it. I know." He turned and walked back toward the facility. At the door, he paused and looked back. The report. What did it say about her prognosis? Sienna's chest tightened. She could lie, should lie, but she owed him honesty. It said unlikely to regain consciousness. Ethan's expression didn't change. "Yeah, that's what they all say." He went inside. Sienna stood on the sidewalk until she couldn't feel her feet anymore. Then she drove home through snow that was starting to stick. That night she sat in her apartment, a penthouse in the seaport that had cost more than most people made in a lifetime, and felt the walls close in. Everything was clean lines and expensive furniture. Not a single photograph, not a single thing that suggested anyone actually lived there. She'd built this life deliberately. No attachments, no distractions, nothing that could be used against her. Looking at it now, it just felt empty. She thought about Ethan reading to a daughter who couldn't hear him, decorating a room for a child who couldn't see it, showing up every single night because love didn't require reciprocation to be real. Sienna had spent her whole adult life believing that power was the only thing that mattered, that money could solve any problem and control could prevent any pain. Ethan Cole had shown her exactly how wrong she was. The weekend passed in a fog. Saturday. Sienna worked from home, trying to focus on quarterly projections and failing. Sunday, she went to the office even though it was empty, just to have somewhere to be. Monday morning, she arrived at 6 a.m. to find Derek Chen already at his desk. "You're here early," she said. Derek looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah. Trying to redistribute Cole's projects. It's a lot more complicated than I thought." "He's not gone yet." "His resignation takes effect Friday. I figured I should get ahead of it." Sienna felt something twist. "Has he cleared out his desk?" "Not yet, but he sent me a list of his active projects and who he thinks should take them over. Very thorough, very Ethan." She wanted to ask if Derek had spoken to him, if he'd mentioned anything, if there was any indication he might change his mind, but that would reveal too much. "Keep me posted," she said instead. In her office, she tried to work. Failed. Stared out the window at Boston. Tried again. At 10 a.m., her assistant buzzed. "Ms. Hart, there's a call for you. A Dr. Sarah Patel from Bright Horizons Care Facility." Sienna's stomach dropped. "Put her through." The woman's voice was calm, professional. "Ms. Hart, I'm calling because you're listed as an emergency contact for Rosalie Cole." "I'm what?" "According to our system, Ethan Cole added you to the contact list Friday evening. I'm calling because, is Rosalie okay? Is Ethan okay?" "Rosalie's condition is unchanged, but Mr. Cole was in a car accident this morning." The world tilted. "What happened?" "He was on his way here when another vehicle ran a light. He's at Mass General now. Non-life-threatening injuries, but he's being held for observation. He asked me to call you." He asked, "Why would he ask for me?" "He said he needed someone to sit with his daughter, that he promised her he'd read today's chapter and he can't break that promise." Sienna was already grabbing her coat. "I'm on my way." She made it to Bright Horizons in 20 minutes, breaking every traffic law between the Seaport and Brookline. The woman at the front desk recognized her. "You're here for Rosalie?" "Yes." "Dr. Patel is waiting for you. 3rd floor, room 307. The elevator ride up felt like falling. Sienna didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know how to talk to a child, let alone one in a minimally responsive state. What had Ethan been thinking, putting her on the emergency contact list? Dr. Patel met her in the hallway. She was younger than Sienna expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and the sort of calm that came from years of delivering bad news. "Ms. Hart, thank you for coming. How's Ethan?" "Fractured collarbone, some bruising, mild concussion. He'll be fine, but he needs to stay at Mass General for at least 24 hours. "And Rosalie?" Dr. Patel's expression softened. "Would you like to meet her?" She led Sienna down a hallway painted in soft colors, past rooms with open doors where people sat beside beds, holding hands, reading, talking to silence. At 307, Dr. Patel stopped. A few things before you go in. Rosalie is in a minimally conscious state. That means she has some awareness, but it's inconsistent. Sometimes her eyes track movement. Sometimes she responds to voices. But there's no pattern we can predict. Don't expect her to interact with you. Okay? Ethan left a book on the nightstand. He wanted you to read chapter 14. He said Rosalie would understand why. Sienna's throat felt tight. I don't know if I can do this. You can. Just talk to her like she's listening, because she might be. Dr. Patel opened the door. The room was small but bright. Someone, Ethan, obviously, had tried to make it feel like a child's bedroom instead of a medical facility. There were drawings taped to the walls, crayon sketches of houses and animals and families. A shelf held stuffed animals and books. String lights hung around the window, currently off. And in the bed, tiny beneath white blankets, was Rosalie Cole. She was small for 5, dark hair like Ethan's. Her eyes were closed. A feeding tube ran from her nose. Monitors beeped quietly. Sienna stood frozen in the doorway. Dr. Patel touched her shoulder gently. I'll be at the nurse's station if you need anything. Then she was alone with a little girl who existed in the space between living and dying. Sienna moved to the chair beside the bed. Someone had left a book there. The Secret Garden, worn and well-loved. A bookmark indicated chapter 14. She picked it up with shaking hands. Hi, Rosalie. My name is Sienna. I work with your dad. He asked me to come read to you today because he got a little hurt and can't be here right now. He's okay. He's going to be fine. But he wanted to make sure you didn't miss your story. Nothing. No response. Just the quiet beep of monitors. Sienna opened the book to chapter 14 and started reading. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Too formal, too stiff. She didn't know how Ethan did this. How he came here every night and read to silence and didn't break under the weight of it. But as she read, something happened. The words started to matter less than the act of saying them. She found herself leaning forward, speaking softer, imagining that somewhere behind closed eyes, a little girl was listening. She read for 45 minutes. When she finished the chapter, she closed the book and sat in silence. Your dad talks about you at work sometimes. Not directly, but I can tell. The way he checks his watch, the way he leaves exactly at 5:30 no matter what. He's thinking about you. He's coming here. And I used to think that was frustrating, that he should care more about his career, but I was wrong. He's doing the most important thing a person can do. He's showing up for someone who needs him. Sienna felt tears on her face and didn't bother wiping them away. I don't know if you can hear me. The doctors say maybe, maybe not. But if you can, your dad is the best person I've ever met, and he needs you to keep fighting. So please, please keep fighting. She stayed until visiting hours ended. On her way out, she stopped at the nurse's station. If anything changes, call me immediately. The nurse nodded. Mr. Cole usually brings fresh drawings on Thursdays. If he can't make it, I'll bring them. Sienna drove to Mass General. It took 3 different people and 20 minutes of arguing before they'd let her see Ethan. He was in a private room, his left arm in a sling, his face bruised. When he saw her, his expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something she couldn't read. You went. You put me on the contact list. I didn't think you'd actually show up. Sienna sat in the chair beside his bed. I read chapter 14. She didn't respond, but I read it. Ethan closed his eyes. Thank you. Why did you add me to her contact list after everything? He was quiet for a long time. Because when Dr. Patel asked if there was anyone else who could sit with her, you were the only person I could think of. I don't have family nearby. Jenna's parents are in Florida and they can't handle seeing her like that. My friends are all, I don't know where my friends are anymore. It's been 3 years and everyone moved on and I don't blame them, but I also don't have anyone to call, except apparently you. I'm glad you called. Are you? Yes. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. You were crying, I can tell. It's been a strange day. Sienna. Her name and his voice sounded different. What are you doing here? I don't know, she admitted. I just know I couldn't be anywhere else. The machines beeped. Snow hit the window. The resignation, Ethan said finally. I'm withdrawing it. Sienna's breath caught. Why? Because you showed up, not as my boss, Not because you wanted something from me. You just showed up. That's not enough reason to... It is to me. He shifted, wincing. I'm tired, Sienna. I'm so tired of being alone in this, and I don't trust you. Not yet. But you read to my daughter when I couldn't. That matters. I didn't do it to get you to stay. I know. That's why I'm staying. Sienna felt something warm break open in her chest. I don't deserve that. Probably not, but here we are. A nurse came in to check his vitals. Sienna stood to leave. Wait, Ethan said. Thursday. If I can't get out of here by then, would you? I'll bring the drawings and read the next chapter. You don't have to. I want to. Ethan nodded. His eyes were already closing, exhaustion pulling him under. Sienna left the hospital and sat in her car for a long time watching the snow fall on Boston. Somewhere in this city was a little girl in a bed, waiting for her father. Somewhere else was a man who refused to stop hoping. And somehow, impossibly, Sienna had been pulled into their orbit. She didn't know what happened next. Didn't know if Rosalie would ever wake up, or if Ethan would ever really trust her, or if any of this would lead anywhere but more pain. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was part of something that mattered more than money, or power, or winning. She started the car and drove home through the snow. Thursday came faster than Sienna expected. Ethan was still at Mass General. The doctors wanted to monitor his concussion for another day, which meant she was back at Bright Horizons with a folder of drawings she'd picked up from his apartment and a knot in her stomach that wouldn't loosen. The apartment had been worse than she'd imagined. Not dirty, but bare in a way that hurt to see. One bedroom that clearly belonged to a child who hadn't lived there in 3 years, stuffed animals on a bed that was made with hospital corners, a bookshelf organized by size, everything frozen in time. Ethan's room was just a mattress on the floor and a dresser. That was it. No art on the walls, no personal items except a framed photo of Jenna and Rosalie at a beach somewhere, both of them laughing. Sienna had stood in that hallway between the two bedrooms and understood something she hadn't before. Ethan wasn't living. He was existing in the space between past and present, waiting for a future that might never come. She'd taken the drawings from a cabinet in the kitchen. Ethan had labeled them by date in neat handwriting and left before the emptiness could swallow her whole. Now she sat in Rosalie's room at Bright Horizons, the folder on her lap, trying to figure out how this had become her life. Okay, Rosalie, your dad sent these. Let me see what we've got. She pulled out the first drawing. It was a crayon sketch of what looked like a garden with wildly disproportionate flowers and a stick figure girl in the center. Sienna taped it to the wall next to the others, stepping back to see the collection. There were dozens. Some were crude, clearly done by a 5-year-old's hand before the accident. Others were more recent, drawn by Ethan in a style that deliberately mimicked a child's work, like he was trying to keep Rosalie's presence in the room alive. The thought made Sienna's throat tight. She sat back down and opened The Secret Garden to chapter 15. All right. Where we left off, Mary had just found the key to the garden. Let's see what happens next. She read for an hour. Somewhere around page 30, she stopped thinking about how strange this was and just focused on the story. When she finished the chapter, she closed the book and looked at Rosalie. The little girl's eyes were open. Sienna's breath caught. She'd seen Rosalie's eyes open before. Dr. Patel had warned her it happened sometimes, that it didn't necessarily mean consciousness. But this felt different. There was something in the way Rosalie's gaze seemed to fix on the window, on the light coming through. Rosalie? Can you hear me? Nothing. The eyes didn't move. Sienna reached out slowly and touched Rosalie's hand. It was small and warm and completely still. Your dad's going to be here tomorrow. He's okay. He just needs one more day to rest, but he's thinking about you. He's always thinking about you. The eyes stayed open for another minute, then slowly closed. Sienna sat there for a long time after, her hand still resting on Rosalie's, feeling like she'd witnessed something sacred and terrible at once. When she left Bright Horizons that evening, she drove straight to Mass General. Ethan was awake, sitting up in bed looking frustrated and exhausted. They're keeping me another night. Something about my head scans. I don't know. I'm fine. You have a concussion. I've had worse. Sienna pulled a chair close to the bed. I read chapter 15, and I put up the new drawings. Thank you. Her eyes opened. While I was reading, Ethan's expression shifted, hope and caution fighting for space. Did she track movement? Did she respond to anything? No, she just looked at the window, but it felt like, I don't know, it felt like something. It's probably nothing. The doctors say the eye opening is involuntary most of the time. But not all the time. No, not all the time. Ethan rubbed his face with his good hand. I used to track every little thing, every eye movement, every muscle twitch. I'd convince myself she was waking up. Then nothing would happen and I'd crash. It's easier now to just not hope too hard. Sienna heard the exhaustion in his voice and recognized it as something deeper than physical tiredness. This was the sound of someone who'd been running on fumes for 3 years. When do you get out of here? Tomorrow morning if the scans are clear. I'll pick you up. Take you to see Rosalie. You don't have to. I'm picking you up, Ethan. He looked at her for a long moment. Why are you doing this? Because you need help and I can give it. That's not an answer. Sienna thought about lying, about giving him something easy and clean, but she'd lied enough. Because sitting in that room with your daughter made me realize I've spent my entire adult life building things that don't matter. And I don't know how to fix that, but I know showing up for you feels more real than anything else I've done in years. Ethan was quiet. Outside the window, the city lights blurred in the distance. I'm still angry at you, he said finally, for the investigation, for crossing that line. I know, but I'm also glad you're here. I know that too. A nurse came in with medications. Sienna stood to leave. Sienna, Ethan's voice stopped her at the door. When you were reading to her, did you mean what you said about me being a good person? She turned back. I meant every word. The next morning, Sienna arrived at Mass General at 9 to find Ethan already dressed and arguing with a doctor about discharge paperwork. I'm fine, my head is fine, I need to see my daughter. Mr. Cole, you had a significant concussion. We need to ensure... I'll take it easy. I'll rest. Just let me out of here. Sienna stepped in. I'll make sure he follows your instructions. What does he need to do? The doctor looked relieved to have an ally. No driving for 72 hours, no screens for extended periods. If he experiences any dizziness, nausea, or vision changes, he comes back immediately. Done. 20 minutes later, they were in Sienna's car heading toward Brookline. Ethan sat in the passenger seat with his arm in a sling, staring out the window. You didn't have to do this. You've said that 3 times now. I'm aware. I'm just saying. Ethan, let someone help you. It won't kill you. He almost smiled. You're very bossy. I'm a CEO. It's literally my job. They drove in silence for a while. Boston slid past, gray buildings, gray sky, everything the color of cold. Can I ask you something? Ethan said. Sure. The night you showed up at Bright Horizons, you said you didn't know how to apologize. Why not? Sienna kept her eyes on the road. Because I've never had to. I don't have people in my life who I care about disappointing. And the people I work with, if I mess up, I fix it with money or power or strategy. But you can't fix everything that way. Sometimes you just have to admit you were wrong and hope it's enough. Was it enough? I don't know. You're still here. That's something. When they arrived at Bright Horizons, Ethan moved through the lobby like he was on autopilot. Everyone knew him. The receptionist smiled and buzzed them through without asking questions. A nurse in the hallway stopped to ask how he was feeling. I'm good, Marie. Thanks. We were worried about you. Rosalie had a good couple of days, though. Dr. Patel said her vitals have been strong. Something in Ethan's posture relaxed slightly. Yeah? Yeah. Go see your girl. Room 307 looked exactly as Sienna had left it. The new drawings on the wall, the string light still off. Rosalie in the bed, eyes closed, breathing steady. Ethan sat in the chair beside her and took her hand. Hey, Rosie, it's Dad. Sorry I missed a couple days. I had a little accident, but I'm okay. Sienna came and read to you. Did you like that? She said you opened your eyes. That's my girl. Sienna stood near the door, feeling like an intruder on something private. But Ethan glanced back at her. You can come in. She won't mind. Sienna sat in the other chair, the one she'd occupied for the past 2 days. Ethan pulled out The Secret Garden and opened it to chapter 16. His voice when he read was different from hers, softer. like he was telling Rosalie a secret instead of reading words off a page. Sienna listened and watched the way his thumb traced circles on Rosalie's hand, an unconscious gesture of comfort that probably meant nothing to a child who couldn't feel it and everything to a father who needed to give it. Halfway through the chapter, Ethan's voice cracked. He stopped reading. "Sorry, it's been a long week." "You want me to finish?" He handed her the book without a word. Sienna read the rest of the chapter while Ethan sat with his head bowed, his good hand still holding Rosalie's. When she finished, she closed the book and the three of them sat in silence. "Do you think she knows I'm here?" Ethan asked quietly. "I think she does. The doctors say there's no way to tell, that the brain activity they see could be anything, could be dreams, could be nothing. But you don't believe that." "I can't believe that. If I believe that, then what am I doing here every night? What's the point?" Sienna didn't have an answer for that. She just sat with him while the monitors beeped and the afternoon light shifted across the floor. They stayed until visiting hours ended. On the way out, Dr. Patel stopped them in the hallway. "Ethan, glad you're all right. Can I talk to you both for a minute?" They followed her into a small office. Dr. Patel closed the door and gestured for them to sit. "I wanted to update you on Rosalie's status. We've been monitoring her closely, and there's been some interesting developments in the past few days." Ethan leaned forward. "What kind of developments?" "Her brain activity has shown some unusual patterns. Nothing definitive, but there's been increased response to auditory stimuli. We think she might be processing sound more than she has been." "What does that mean?" "It could mean nothing, or it could mean her brain is starting to reconnect pathways that were damaged. We won't know without more time. But I wanted you to know that the reading you've been doing and that Ms. Hart has been doing might actually be reaching her." Sienna felt something flutter in her chest. Ethan's face had gone pale. "Are you saying she might wake up?" "I'm saying don't lose hope, that's all. We've seen cases where patients in minimally conscious states have made unexpected progress. Rosalie's young, her brain has plasticity, and she has a father who refuses to give up on her. Those things matter." After they left Dr. Patel's office, Ethan stood in the parking lot, looking like he'd been hit by something invisible. 3 years, he said. 3 years of doctors telling me to prepare for the worst. And now, don't get ahead of it, Sienna said gently. She said, don't lose hope. Not that it's guaranteed. I know, but for the first time in 3 years, there's a chance. A real chance. They got in the car. Sienna drove Ethan back to his apartment, helped him inside with groceries she'd insisted on stopping for, and was about to leave when he stopped her. Stay for dinner. Ethan, you need to rest. I need to not be alone right now, please. So Sienna stayed. Ethan's apartment looked even worse in daylight. She tried not to react, but he noticed. I know it's depressing. I don't spend much time here, just sleep and shower, basically. You could afford somewhere better. Your salary goes to Bright Horizons, every extra dollar. I don't need better. I need Rosalie to have the best care possible. Sienna helped him make pasta one-handed, which involved a lot of awkward maneuvering and eventually her just taking over while he sat at the tiny kitchen table and directed. More salt. No, more than that. You cook like someone who's afraid of flavor. I don't cook. I have people who cook for me. Of course you do. They ate at the table in a silence that was almost comfortable. Sienna couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a meal with another person that wasn't a business dinner or a networking event. This is weird, Ethan said. What is? This. You being here. Me wanting you here. A month ago, I couldn't stand being in the same room with you. What changed? You did. Or maybe I did. I don't know. He pushed pasta around his plate. When you showed up at the hospital, I was so angry. Angry that you'd found Rosalie. Angry that you'd invaded that part of my life too. But then you read to her. And you weren't doing it for me. You were doing it for her. Like she mattered to you. She does matter. Why? Sienna set down her fork. Because she matters to you, and you matter to me. The words hung between them. Ethan looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Sienna? Her phone rang. She almost ignored it, but the ringtone was her emergency line. Only 3 people had that number. I'm sorry, I have to take this. She stepped into the living room. This is Sienna Hart. Ms. Hart, this is Dr. Patel at Bright Horizons. I need you to come back to the facility immediately. Sienna's blood went cold. What happened? Rosalie's condition has changed. We need Mr. Cole here now. We're on our way. She hung up and turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway, his face white. What's wrong? We need to go. Now. They made it to Bright Horizons in 15 minutes. Sienna didn't remember the drive, just Ethan beside her, silent and rigid, his good hand gripping the door handle like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Dr. Patel met them in the lobby. She's stable, but about an hour ago she showed significant movement. Her right hand clenched and unclenched repeatedly. Then her eyes opened and tracked a nurse across the room. Ethan swayed. Sienna grabbed his arm. Tracked? Like, purposefully? It appeared that way. We're running tests now, but I thought you should be here. They followed Dr. Patel to room 307. A team of doctors and nurses were clustered around Rosalie's bed, checking monitors, making notes. When they saw Ethan, they stepped back. Rosalie's eyes were open, and they were looking directly at the door, directly at Ethan. Rosie? His voice cracked. He moved to the bed, sat down, took her hand. Baby, it's Dad. Can you hear me? For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then Rosalie's fingers moved, just slightly, but deliberately. They curled around Ethan's hand. Someone in the room gasped. Maybe it was Sienna. She couldn't tell through the roaring in her ears. Ethan was crying. That's my girl. That's my girl. I'm here. I'm right here. The doctors moved back in, checking responses, testing reflexes. Sienna stood against the wall, her hand over her mouth, watching something impossible happen in real time. Dr. Patel came to stand beside her. This is extraordinary. 3 years with almost no responsive movement, and now this. What does it mean? It means her brain is waking up. How far, we don't know yet. But this is more than we've seen before. Sienna watched Ethan hold his daughter's hand, watched him whisper to her through tears, watched 3 years of grief and hope and exhaustion finally break into something that might be joy. Over the next 2 hours, Rosalie's responses came and went. Sometimes her eyes tracked movement. Sometimes they didn't. Her fingers would squeeze Ethan's hand, then go still. It was inconsistent, unpredictable, but it was real. Finally, around midnight, the medical team stepped back to let Ethan have time alone with her. Sienna started to leave, but Ethan called her back. Stay, please. So she sat in the chair while Ethan pulled The Secret Garden from the nightstand and opened to chapter 17. Okay, Rosie, let's keep going. I know you're tired, but I promised you we'd find out what happens next. He read in a voice that shook, pausing every few sentences to look at Rosalie's face, checking for any sign that she was hearing him. Halfway through the chapter, Rosalie's eyes opened again, and this time they looked at Ethan, really looked at him, with recognition, with something that might have been awareness. Ethan stopped reading. Rosie? Her mouth moved. No sound came out, but her lips shaped something that looked like Daddy. Ethan dropped the book and gathered her into his arms as carefully as he could with one arm in a sling, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. Sienna turned away, giving them privacy, her own tears falling freely now. She walked out into the hallway and stood there for a long time, trying to process what she'd just witnessed. A little girl coming back from the edge of nothing. A father who'd refused to give up even when everyone told him to. Dr. Patel found her there. You should go home, Ms. Hart. Get some rest. This is going to be a long process. Is she really waking up? I think so. But it won't be linear. There will be setbacks. Progress might be slow. We're talking months or years of rehabilitation. But she's coming back. She's coming back. Sienna nodded, unable to speak. She went back into room 307. Ethan was still holding Rosalie, talking to her softly. When he saw Sienna, he looked up with a face transformed by something she'd never seen before. Pure, uncomplicated hope. She squeezed my hand again, 3 times, like she was trying to tell me something. I'm so glad. I couldn't have done this without you. You've been doing this for 3 years without me. But this week, if you hadn't been here, if you hadn't read to her, stop. This is you. This is your daughter fighting because you never stopped believing she would. Ethan looked at Rosalie, then back at Sienna. Stay with us. Just for tonight. I don't want to be alone for this. So Sienna stayed. She curled up in the other chair and dozed fitfully while Ethan sat beside Rosalie's bed, holding her hand, reading to her in whispers when her eyes opened. Sometime around 3 a.m., Sienna woke to find Ethan looking at her. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything. You don't have to thank me. Yeah, I do. Outside the window, snow had started falling again. Inside room 307, a little girl slept with her father keeping watch, and a woman who'd never believed in anything she couldn't control found herself believing in something as fragile and fierce as hope. Dawn broke over Brookline in shades of gray and pink, the snow from the night before turning the world clean and quiet. Sienna woke stiff and disoriented in the chair beside Rosalie's bed, her neck aching from the angle she'd slept at. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then she saw Ethan, still sitting exactly where he'd been hours ago, his good hand wrapped around his daughter's, his head tilted back against the chair as he dozed. Rosalie's eyes were closed, her breathing steady and calm. Sienna stood carefully, trying not to wake either of them, and stepped into the hallway. The facility was quiet at this hour, just the distant sound of morning shift nurses starting their rounds and the ever-present hum of medical equipment. She found a bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at herself in the mirror. She looked terrible, makeup smudged, hair a mess, the same clothes she'd been wearing for nearly 24 hours. She looked like someone who'd spent the night in a care facility watching miracles happen in increments. Her phone had 17 missed calls, all from the office. She'd completely forgotten about work. The realization should have sent her into panic mode. Instead, she felt nothing but a vague awareness that somewhere in Boston, Hart Capital was functioning without her, and the world hadn't ended. She called her assistant. Ms. Hart, thank God. We've been trying to reach you all night. The Singapore deal. Handle it. I'm sorry. What? You heard me. Handle it. Get Kellerman and Michelle on a call. They know what to do. I'm taking personal time. There was a shocked pause. Personal time? You're taking personal time. Is that a problem? No, You've never taken personal time. In 6 years. Well, I'm taking it now. I'll be back when I'm back. She hung up before her assistant could respond and turned off her phone entirely. When she got back to room 307, Ethan was awake, looking at Rosalie with an expression of such fierce tenderness it hurt to witness. She opened her eyes twice while you were gone, he said without looking away from his daughter. Just for a few seconds each time. But she looked at me. Really looked at me. Sienna sat down. That's incredible. Dr. Patel was in earlier. She said they want to start doing more intensive assessments today. Speech therapy evaluation, physical therapy consult. They're talking about moving her to a different facility that specializes in brain injury rehabilitation. That's good, right? It's terrifying. Ethan finally looked at her. For 3 years, nothing changed. I knew what to expect. I knew the routine. And now everything's different, and I don't know what to do with that. You do what you've been doing. You show up. What if she wakes up all the way and doesn't remember me? What if the brain damage is too severe and she's not... What if she's not who she was? Sienna reached across and took his free hand. Then you love whoever she is now. Ethan's eyes filled. I don't know how to do this. Nobody does. But you're not alone anymore. He squeezed her hand. They sat like that for a while, connected by something neither of them had words for yet. A nurse came in around 8 with breakfast trays, one for Rosalie through her feeding tube, one for Ethan. She looked surprised to see Sienna. You're still here? Honey, you should go home and rest. I'm fine. The nurse gave her a knowing smile. If you say so, there's coffee in the family lounge down the hall. It's terrible, but it's hot. After she left, Ethan said, You should go. You've done enough. Do you want me to go? He hesitated. No, but I can't ask you to stay. You have a company to run. The company can run itself for a few days. I'm staying. Sienna, unless you don't want me here, in which case I'll leave. But don't make me leave because you think you're being a burden. You're not. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Okay, stay. So she stayed. The day unfolded in a series of medical professionals coming and going. A neurologist who asked Rosalie to squeeze hands and follow lights with her eyes. A speech therapist who tested her ability to swallow. A physical therapist who evaluated her muscle tone and reflexes. Each one brought new information, new possibilities, new uncertainties. Rosalie's responses were inconsistent. Sometimes she'd follow commands, sometimes she wouldn't. Her eyes would track movement for a few seconds, then drift away. It was progress, everyone agreed, but fragile and unpredictable. Ethan oscillated between euphoria and terror with each test. Sienna stayed close, learning when to speak and when to just be present. Around noon, Dr. Patel came in with a tablet full of scan results. I wanted to show you what we're seeing. The brain activity is significantly increased from her baseline. The areas that control language comprehension and motor planning are showing activity we haven't seen before. This is very encouraging. But, Ethan said, because there was always a but. But we don't know how much function she'll regain. The injury was severe. She's made remarkable progress in the past 12 hours, but that doesn't mean she'll return to her pre-injury state. We need to manage expectations. I know, I get it. Just tell me she has a chance. She has a chance, a real one, better than I would have predicted 48 hours ago. After Dr. Patel left, Ethan stood and paced the small room like a caged animal. I need to call people. Jenna's parents. They should know. And my boss? Shit, I haven't been to work in days. Your boss is standing right here. You're on paid leave, effective immediately. You can't just, I'm the CEO. I can do whatever I want. And what I want is for you to focus on Rosalie without worrying about your job. So that's handled. Ethan stopped pacing. Why are you doing this? Because it's the right thing to do. That's not good enough. You're a businesswoman. You don't do things just because they're right. There's always an angle. So what's yours? The question hit harder than it should have. Sienna had been asking herself the same thing for days. I don't have an angle. Maybe that's the problem. My whole life has been angles and strategies and figuring out how to win. And then I met you and you didn't care about any of that. You just cared about your daughter. And it made me realize I don't have anything in my life that matters the way she matters to you. So maybe I'm here because I want to understand what that feels like. Or maybe I'm here because, for the first time in my life, I actually care about someone other than myself. I don't know. But there's no angle. This is just me trying to be a decent human being. Ethan stared at her. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. I'm working on it. He almost smiled. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went complicated. It's Jenna's mom. I need to take this. He stepped into the hallway. Sienna could hear his voice through the door, patient and careful, explaining what had happened. There was a long pause, then what sounded like crying, not Ethan's. When he came back 15 minutes later, he looked exhausted. They're flying up from Florida. They'll be here tomorrow. That's good. Is it? Ethan sat down heavily. They haven't seen her in 6 months. Last time they visited, Jenna's mom had a breakdown. She couldn't handle seeing Rosalie like that. They stopped coming. And I don't blame them. Losing your daughter and then having your granddaughter stuck in this limbo, it's too much. But now Rosalie's waking up and they want to be here, and I don't know if I can handle their grief on top of everything else. You won't be handling it alone. Sienna, you can't. I can and I will. When they get here, I'll be here. Unless you don't want me to be. I want you here. That's the problem. I'm starting to depend on you being here, and I don't know what that means. Sienna didn't know either, but she knew she wasn't leaving. That afternoon, while Ethan dozed in the chair, the exhaustion finally catching up to him, Sienna sat with Rosalie and talked to her quietly. Your dad is the bravest person I've ever met. I know you can't respond yet, but I need you to know that. He never gave up on you, not for one single day. And now you're coming back to him, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Rosalie's eyes opened. They focused on Sienna with an intensity that made her breath catch. Hi, sweetheart. I'm Sienna. I work with your dad. I've been reading to you while he was sick. Did you like The Secret Garden? Your dad says it's your favorite. Rosalie's mouth moved. No sound, but the shape of the words was clear. Where, Daddy? Sienna's heart nearly stopped. He's right here. He's sleeping. Should I wake him? Rosalie's eyes moved to where Ethan sat, his head tilted back, mouth slightly open. For the first time in 3 years, she was looking at him with recognition. Ethan. Sienna kept her voice calm, even though she wanted to shout. Ethan, wake up. He jolted awake. What? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Look at her. Ethan turned. Rosalie was staring directly at him. And then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, rough from years of disuse, she said, Daddy. The word hung in the air like a miracle. Ethan's face crumpled. He moved to the bed, gathered Rosalie as carefully as he could, and sobbed into her hair. I'm here, baby. I'm here. I've been here the whole time. You came back. You came back to me. Rosalie's small hand lifted, the movement shaky and uncertain, and touched his face. Sienna backed toward the door to give them privacy, but Rosalie's eyes tracked her movement. The little girl made a sound, something between a word and a cry. Ethan looked up. I think she wants you to stay. So Sienna stayed, witnessing a reunion that had been 3 years in the making, feeling like an intruder and a necessary witness all at once. The medical team descended within minutes of Ethan pressing the call button. They ran tests, asked questions, documented everything. Rosalie could say a few words. Daddy, yes, no, tired. Her voice was weak but present. Her movements were limited but intentional. It was the best possible outcome anyone could have hoped for. Dr. Patel pulled Ethan aside while the other doctors finished their assessments. This is extraordinary. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen recovery like this from a patient with her injury profile. What happens now? We move her to Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital. They specialize in traumatic brain injury recovery. She'll need intensive therapy, speech, physical, occupational. It's going to be a long road. But Ethan, she spoke. She recognized you. That's the foundation everything else builds on. How long until she's normal? There's no timeline. Every brain injury is different, but she's young. Her brain has plasticity. With the right support, she could make significant progress. What about the cost? Dr. Patel's expression shifted. Spaulding is expensive. Insurance will cover some, but not all. I can connect you with their financial services to work out a plan. After she left, Ethan sat down and put his head in his hands. I can't afford Spaulding, not with what I've already spent keeping her here. Sienna had been waiting for this. Yes, you can. Sienna, I'm setting up a fund for families dealing with long-term care costs. Rosalie will be the first beneficiary. Spaulding will be covered. All of it. I can't accept that. You can and you will. This isn't charity. This is me using money for something that actually matters. Let me do this. Why? Because watching you nearly destroy yourself paying for her care made me realize I have more money than I know what to do with, and I've never used it for anything that wasn't about making more money. Let me do something good with it, please. Ethan looked at Rosalie, who had fallen asleep again, her small face peaceful. You're going to make me cry again. I'll allow it. He did cry, and Sienna sat with him while he did, not trying to fix it or stop it, just being present. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. Rosalie was transferred to Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital in Charlestown. The facility was beautiful, bright and modern, nothing like the dimly lit care facility she'd been in. Her new room had windows overlooking the harbor and equipment designed specifically for pediatric brain injury patients. Jenna's parents arrived from Florida, a couple in their late 60s who looked like they'd aged a decade in 3 years. Sienna met them in the lobby. You must be Ethan's boss, Jenna's mother, Carol, said. He mentioned you on the phone. Thank you for giving him time off. It's the least I could do. Carol studied her. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone less invested. But I saw how you looked at my granddaughter. That's not how a boss looks at an employee's kid. Sienna didn't know what to say to that. The reunion between Carol and Rosalie was painful to watch. Carol held her granddaughter and wept, apologizing over and over for staying away so long. Rosalie, confused and overwhelmed, cried too. Ethan intervened gently. Mom, she's tired. Maybe give her some space. I'm sorry. She looks so much like Jenna. They stepped into the hallway. Carol composed herself while her husband, Robert, stood with his hand on her back. "How is she really?" Carol asked Ethan. "The doctors gave us the clinical version, but I want to hear it from you." "She's awake. She can talk a little. She recognized me. But she's not the same Rosie she was before the accident. She might never be. We don't know yet." "Does she remember her mother?" "I don't think so. Or if she does, she hasn't said anything." Carol's face crumpled again. Robert pulled her into a hug. Sienna felt like she should leave, but Ethan caught her eye and gave a small shake of his head. "Stay." Later that evening, after Jenna's parents had left to find a hotel, Ethan and Sienna sat in Rosalie's room while she slept. The day had been overwhelming for everyone, especially Rosalie, who'd fallen asleep before dinner and hadn't stirred since. "Carol doesn't like me," Sienna said. "She doesn't know you. She thinks I'm trying to replace her daughter." Ethan looked at her. "Are you?" "What? No, that's not... I would never... I'm not accusing you. I'm just asking what this is. Because we've been dancing around it for days now, and I'm too tired to keep pretending I don't notice." Sienna's mouth went dry. "I don't know what this is. Do you want to know?" "I'm scared to know." "Me too." Ethan stood and walked to the window. Boston glittered in the distance. "A month ago, you were my boss and I actively avoided you. 2 weeks ago, I was ready to quit because you invaded my privacy. And now you're here, helping me through the biggest moment of my life. And I don't know how to process that. We don't have to process it. We can just be here and deal with everything else later. Except I don't think there's going to be a later where this makes sense. You're a billionaire CEO. I'm a single dad with a daughter who needs years of rehabilitation. We don't fit. Maybe we don't have to fit." Ethan turned to look at her. "What does that mean?" Sienna stood and faced him. "It means I don't care about fitting. I care about being here. With you. With Rosalie. I care about showing up every day and doing whatever needs to be done. And if that doesn't fit into some neat category, then fine. I'm okay with that. You're going to get tired of this. Of the hospital visits and the therapy appointments and the setbacks. This isn't glamorous. It's not a project you can solve and move on from. I know that. Do you? Because 3 months from now, when you're still sitting in rehabilitation waiting rooms and Rosalie is having a bad day and I'm exhausted and short-tempered, are you still going to be here? Yes. You can't promise that. Watch me." They stared at each other. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, a little girl slept, her breathing steady and strong. "I want to believe you," Ethan said quietly, "but I can't afford to be wrong. Not about this. Not with Rosalie involved. Then don't believe me yet. Just let me prove it." Before Ethan could respond, Rosalie stirred. Her eyes opened and she looked around the unfamiliar room with confusion. "Daddy?" Ethan was at her side immediately. "I'm here, baby. You're in a new hospital. A better one. You're safe." "Scared." "I know, but I'm not going anywhere. And Sienna's here too. Remember Sienna?" Rosalie's eyes found Sienna. "Garden lady." Sienna felt tears sting her eyes. "That's right. I'm the garden lady. I read to you about the secret garden." "Read more?" Ethan pulled out the book. He'd brought it with them from Bright Horizons. "You want to hear more of the story?" Rosalie nodded. Ethan opened to where they'd left off and started reading. His voice was rough with emotion but steady. Rosalie listened, her eyes drifting between her father and Sienna, like she was trying to understand how these two people fit together in her newly awakening world. When the chapter ended, Rosalie was asleep again. Ethan set the book aside and looked at Sienna. "She called you the garden lady." "I heard." "She remembers you reading to her." "Maybe." "Not maybe, she does." Ethan's expression was complicated. "You've become part of her story now. You understand that, right? You can't just disappear. It would hurt her." "I'm not going to disappear." "You say that now. Ethan, stop." Sienna moved closer. "I know you're scared. I know you don't trust easily, but I need you to hear me. I'm not going anywhere. Not tomorrow, not next month, not when things get hard. I'm here for both of you. And I know I have to earn that trust, so let me. Just give me the chance to show you I mean it." Ethan looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded, just once. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it was a start. They stayed at the hospital until late. Then Ethan insisted Sienna go home and get real sleep. She drove back to the seaport in the early hours of the morning, let herself into her empty apartment, and stood in the silence. Everything looked exactly as she'd left it, clean, expensive, devoid of life. She walked to her bedroom, pulled out her phone, and made a call. "Ms. Hart?" Her assistant sounded alarmed. "It's 2 a.m. I need you to do something tomorrow, first thing." "Of course. What do you need?" "Research the best family law attorneys in Boston and find me a real estate agent who specializes in accessible homes near Spalding Rehabilitation Hospital." There was a pause. "I'm sorry. Accessible homes?" "Wheelchair accessible. Therapy room capable. Safe for a child with medical needs. And Patricia and HR have her draft a new benefits package. Full coverage for long-term medical care. Not just for Ethan, for everyone. I want it ready for board approval by next month." "Ms. Hart, are you feeling all right?" "I'm feeling clearer than I have in years. Just do it." She hung up and looked around her apartment one more time, then she started packing a bag. She had a feeling she wouldn't be spending much time here anymore. And for the first time in her life, that didn't feel like losing something. It felt like finally finding what mattered. The first month of Rosalie's rehabilitation was nothing like the movies made it seem. There was no montage of steady progress set to inspirational music. There were tantrums and setbacks and days when she couldn't remember how to hold a spoon. There were moments when Ethan looked so defeated that Sienna wanted to fix it with money or power or anything in her arsenal, only to realize that some things couldn't be fixed, just endured. Sienna showed up anyway. She learned the names of all the therapists. She figured out that Rosalie responded better to speech exercises when they were disguised as games. She sat through family meetings where doctors used words like plateau and realistic expectations and watched Ethan's jaw tighten with each one. On a Tuesday in late March, 6 weeks after Rosalie had first opened her eyes, Sienna found Ethan in the hallway outside the physical therapy room, his back against the wall, his eyes closed. "Bad session?" she asked. She got frustrated, started crying, said her legs don't work and she wants to go home. What did the therapist say? That it's normal, that we should expect emotional regression along with the physical challenges, that I should be patient. Ethan's voice cracked. "I'm trying to be patient, but watching her struggle to do things she used to do without thinking, it's killing me." Sienna sat down on the floor beside him. After a moment, he joined her. "You know what I realized last week?" she said. "What?" "I spent 30 years thinking success meant never failing. That if I just worked hard enough, controlled enough variables, made enough money, I could avoid pain. And then I met you and Rosalie and learned that's bullshit. Some things hurt no matter what you do. The choice is whether you run from it or sit with it." Ethan looked at her. Ethan looked at, "Is there a point to this philosophy lesson?" "The point is you're doing the hardest thing a person can do. You're loving someone even though it hurts. And that's not failure. That's the whole game." He leaned his head back against the wall. "The whole game sucks." "Yeah, it really does." They sat in silence until the therapist opened the door and called them back in. Rosalie was calmer, working on a puzzle designed to improve her fine motor skills. When she saw Sienna, her face lit up. "Garden lady, watch this." She picked up a puzzle piece, her hand shaking with effort, and placed it in the correct spot. Sienna clapped. "That's amazing. I did 3 pieces today. Yesterday only 2. That's progress. Daddy says progress is good even when it's slow." Ethan's expression softened. "That's right, baby." Later, in the hospital cafeteria over terrible coffee, Ethan said, "She lights up when you're around. Have you noticed that?" "I've noticed. It scares me." "Why?" "Because what happens when you decide this is too much? When you realize you have a whole life waiting for you that doesn't involve sitting in rehab hospitals and celebrating puzzle pieces." Sienna set down her coffee. "Ethan, we've had this conversation multiple times. I'm not leaving." "But you could. And it would destroy her. It would destroy me." "Then it's a good thing I'm not leaving." "You don't know that. People make promises all the time. Stop." Sienna's voice was sharp enough to cut. "I know you're scared. I know Jenna died and left you alone and you learned that people can disappear without warning. But I'm not Jenna. I'm not making promises I can't keep. I'm here because I choose to be here. Every single day, I make that choice. and I'm going to keep making it until you believe me. Ethan stared at his coffee. What if I never believe you? Then I'll keep showing up anyway. The words hung between them. Around them, the cafeteria hummed with other people's conversations, other people's lives. I'm falling in love with you, Ethan said quietly, and I don't know what to do with that. Sienna's heart stopped, started again. Say that again. I'm falling in love with you, have been for weeks, maybe longer, and it terrifies me because I can't afford to be wrong about you, not with Rosalie depending on me to keep her world stable. You're not wrong about me. How do you know? Because I'm falling in love with you too, both of you, and that terrifies me just as much as it terrifies you. Ethan looked at her finally. His eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted, and more beautiful than anything Sienna had ever seen. I don't know how to do this. The last person I loved died in a car crash and took half of me with her. I don't know how to do this either. I've spent my whole life avoiding attachment because it seemed like weakness. And then you showed me it's actually the only thing that matters. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. Love isn't comfortable. It's terrifying and messy, and it asks you to trust that the person sitting across from you won't destroy you even though they absolutely could. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. If you hurt my daughter, I will never forgive you. I know. And if you hurt me, if you decide this life isn't enough for you, I won't recover from it. I know that too. So where does that leave us? Sienna squeezed his hand. It leaves us here, trying, one day at a time. Spring arrived slowly in Boston, winter reluctant to release its grip. Rosalie made progress that felt glacial, a new word here, a few more steps there. She remembered some things from before the accident and forgot others. She asked about her mother once, and Ethan spent an hour explaining what had happened in terms a 5-year-old could understand, and Sienna sat in the corner crying while Rosalie processed the information with the strange acceptance children sometimes have for tragedy. So Mommy's not coming back? No, baby, she's not. But you're still here, and Garden Lady is here. Yes, we're both here. Okay. And that was it. Later she might process it differently. Later there might be grief and questions and anger, but in that moment she accepted it and moved on, and Sienna marveled at the resilience of children. In April, Sienna made good on her promise to create a fund for families dealing with long-term care costs. She put $5 million into it initially, with plans to add more, and hired a team to manage applications and distribution. The announcement made national news. Billionaire CEO uses fortune to help families in medical crisis. Sienna ignored the press requests and focused on making sure the money actually reached people who needed it. Ethan read about it online and confronted her in the hospital parking lot. $5 million? Sienna, it's a start. Eventually I want it to be 50 million, maybe more. You're doing this because of Rosalie. I'm doing this because of all the Rosalies, and all the Ethans who are drowning in medical debt trying to give their kids a chance. The money was just sitting there doing nothing useful. Now it's actually helping people. You're something else, you know that? Is that a compliment? I think so. He pulled her close and kissed her forehead. Thank you. Don't thank me. Use that energy to get your daughter walking. The breakthrough came on a Thursday in early May. Sienna was in a board meeting, her first in-person appearance at Hart Capital in nearly 2 months, when her phone buzzed. She glanced down. A text from Ethan, all caps. She walked. 12 steps. Get here. Sienna stood up in the middle of a presentation about Q1 earnings. Meeting adjourned. We'll reconvene tomorrow. Ms. Hart, we're not finished. Yes, we are. She was out the door before anyone could protest, leaving a room full of confused executives in her wake. At Spalding, she found Ethan and Rosalie in the physical therapy room, both of them crying and laughing at once. The therapist stood nearby with a video on her phone. Watch this, Ethan said. Sienna watched Rosalie take 12 shaky, determined steps from the parallel bars to her father's arms. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. You did it, Sienna breathed. Rosalie beamed. I walked. Daddy says we can celebrate with ice cream. Ice cream sounds perfect. They went to a place in Charlestown that made homemade flavors. Rosalie got chocolate with sprinkles. Ethan got coffee. Sienna got vanilla because she'd never really developed a sophisticated ice cream palate. They sat outside even though it was chilly, and Rosalie talked non-stop about walking and how her legs were getting stronger and how soon she'd be able to run. Not too soon, Ethan cautioned. We have to build up to running. But I will run, eventually. Eventually, yes. Rosalie looked at Sienna. Will you still be here when I can run? The question hit harder than it should have. Sienna met Ethan's eyes across the table. Yes, I'll still be here. Promise? Promise. Rosalie seemed satisfied. She went back to her ice cream, chocolate smeared across her face, completely unaware that she'd just asked the question that had been haunting both adults for months. Later, after they'd gotten Rosalie back to Spalding and settled for the night, Ethan and Sienna walked along the harbor. The city sparkled across the water. She's going to hold you to that promise, Ethan said. I know. Are you ready for that? I bought a house. Ethan stopped walking. You what? I bought a house in Charlestown. 3 bedrooms, fully accessible, close to Spalding. I was going to tell you, but the timing never seemed right. You bought a house. For us, if you want it. I know your apartment is too small and the stairs are a problem for Rosalie's therapy, and I thought maybe we could all live somewhere together. Or if that's too fast, you and Rosalie could live there, and I'll keep my place in the seaport. Whatever you're comfortable with. Ethan stared at her. You bought us a house. Is that okay? I should have asked first. That was presumptuous. I can sell it. He kissed her. Right there on the harbor walk with joggers passing and the tea rumbling overhead. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. Show me the house. They drove to Charlestown. The house was a renovated brownstone on a quiet street, 3 stories with an elevator installed for accessibility. Hardwood floors, big windows. A backyard that was small but private. Sienna had bought it furnished, working with a designer to make it feel warm without being cluttered. Ethan walked through each room in silence. When he got to the smallest bedroom, painted soft yellow with shelves already installed and a bed shaped like a racing car, he stopped. This is for Rosalie. I thought she might like it, but we can change anything. Paint it different colors, different furniture, whatever she wants. There are books on the shelves. I didn't know what she liked, so I got a bunch of different things. We can return what she doesn't want. Ethan picked up one of the books. The Secret Garden. First edition. I figured after everything, she'd earned it. He set the book down carefully and turned to face her. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You didn't do anything. You just let me be part of your life. That seems like a fair trade for a house. Sienna laughed. The house is a gift, not a trade. And you can say no. Or you can take time to think about it. I'm not trying to rush you into anything. I don't want time. I want this. I want you. I want us to be a family. Yeah? Yeah. They stood in what would be Rosalie's room, surrounded by books and toys, and the future they were building together, and kissed like teenagers who'd just discovered what it felt like to want something this much. The transition out of Spalding happened gradually over the next 6 weeks. Rosalie spent weekends at the Charlestown house, getting used to the space, working with in-home therapists to build her strength and coordination. She loved the backyard, loved her room, loved having her father and Sienna under the same roof. Are you my new mom? She asked Sienna one Saturday morning over pancakes. Sienna looked at Ethan in a panic. He gave her a small shrug. Your call. I'm not your mom, Sienna said carefully. Your mom was someone very special who loved you very much, but I care about you a lot. And I'm going to be here for you, if that's okay. Rosalie considered this. Can I call you Sienna? Of course. Okay. Can I have more pancakes? Just like that, the question was settled in the uncomplicated way children settle things. Carol and Robert visited in June. They'd been coming up once a month, staying for a few days at a time, rebuilding their relationship with Rosalie slowly. The dynamic with Sienna was still awkward, but getting better. Over dinner at the Charlestown house, Carol said, "This is a beautiful home." "Thank you," Sienna said. "Ethan says you bought it for them." "For all of us, actually. I live here too now." Carol set down her fork. "Can I be honest with you? Please." "When Ethan first told me about you, I thought you were some rich woman playing house with my granddaughter. I thought you'd get bored and leave and break both their hearts." Ethan tensed. "Mom, let me finish." Carol looked at Sienna. "I was wrong. I've watched you with Rosalie. I've seen how you look at my son-in-law. And I think Jenna would be grateful that the two people she loved most found someone who loves them too. Sienna's eyes filled. That means everything to me. Good, because you're stuck with us now. Robert raised his glass. To family, however it comes together. They toasted. Rosalie asked what they were toasting to, and Ethan explained it was about being grateful for the people you love. Rosalie raised her juice box. I'm grateful for ice cream. Everyone laughed, and the moment passed, but Sienna felt something shift. This was her family now, messy and complicated and nothing like she'd ever imagined her life would look. It was better. By August, Rosalie was walking without assistance, though she tired easily and still used a wheelchair for longer distances. Her speech had improved dramatically, full sentences, complex thoughts, even some of the sass she'd apparently had before the accident. She started asking about school. The other kids are going to kindergarten. Why can't I? Ethan exchanged looks with Sienna. They'd been dreading this conversation. Your brain is still healing, baby. Regular school might be too much right now. But I'm smart. I can read and do math and everything. I know you can, but there are other things to think about, like if you get tired in the middle of the day or if you need your therapy sessions. I don't want to be different. The words hung there. Rosalie's eyes filled with tears, and Sienna's heart broke. Being different isn't bad, Sienna said gently. Yes, it is. Different means people stare. Different means I can't do things other kids do. Different also means you're stronger than most kids will ever have to be. You came back from something that would have stopped most people. That's not weakness, Rosalie. That's power. I don't feel powerful. I feel tired and frustrated, and I want my brain to work right. Ethan pulled her into a hug. Your brain does work right. It just works differently now. And that's okay. We'll figure it out together. They did figure it out. After weeks of meetings with schools and specialists, they found a private academy that specialized in children with learning differences. It was expensive, but Sienna handled the tuition without blinking. Rosalie started in September, nervous but excited, her backpack almost bigger than she was. That first day, standing in the driveway watching Rosalie get on the school bus, a small, accessible bus that would pick up and drop off right at their door, Ethan grabbed Sienna's hand. 3 years ago, I thought I'd lost her forever. I know. And now she's going to school. She's living. She's going to have a life. She is. I never would have made it here without you. Sienna squeezed his hand. Yes, you would have. You would have done anything for her. You always have. Maybe, but it would have been a lot lonelier. They stood there until the bus disappeared around the corner, then went inside and got ready for work. Ethan had been back at Heart Capital part-time for months, working remotely mostly, coming in for important meetings. Sienna had restructured his role to give him maximum flexibility. Some of the other executives had grumbled about special treatment, and she'd shut that down immediately. If you have a problem with an employee getting accommodation to care for his child, my door is open for your resignation letter. No one had taken her up on that offer. The company had changed in other ways too. The medical benefits fund had expanded. Flexible work policies were now standard. Sienna had even started leaving at 5:30 some days just to prove it could be done. Her assistant had nearly fainted the first time. You're leaving? At 5:30? On a Tuesday? I have a family to get home to. The words felt strange and wonderful in her mouth. On a Friday evening in October, Sienna came home to find Ethan cooking dinner while Rosalie did homework at the kitchen table. The scene was so domestic, it made her chest ache. How was work? Ethan asked, kissing her hello. Long, boring. Tell me something more interesting. Rosalie got an A on her spelling test. Rosalie held up the paper proudly. 10 out of 10. That's amazing, Sienna hugged her. We should celebrate. Ice cream? Rosalie suggested hopefully. Ice cream works. After dinner, after ice cream, after Rosalie had been tucked into bed with The Secret Garden, which she could now read herself but still liked having read to her, Sienna and Ethan sat in the backyard with wine and the comfortable silence of two people who'd learned each other's rhythms. I've been thinking, Ethan said. Dangerous. I'm serious. I've been thinking about what happens next. What do you mean? I mean we've been together almost a year, living together for 6 months. raising Rosalie together, and I don't want to keep calling you my girlfriend like we're 22. Sienna's heart started racing. What do you want to call me? Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket. How about wife? The box contained a simple ring, white gold with a single diamond, nothing ostentatious. It was perfect. Ethan, I know this is complicated. I know I come with a lot of baggage. A daughter with special needs, medical bills that will never fully go away, grief that still sneaks up on me at random moments, but you've shown up for all of it. You've made my life, our lives, better in ways I didn't know were possible. So I'm asking you to make it permanent. Marry me, be Rosalie's stepmother. Let me love you for the rest of my life. Sienna realized she was crying. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Of course I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, and Sienna didn't even want to know how he'd managed to figure out her ring size without her noticing. They kissed in the backyard under the October stars, and somewhere inside the house, Rosalie was sleeping peacefully, and this was what happiness felt like. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and earned and more valuable than any empire Sienna had ever built. The wedding happened in December, small and private. Just family and a handful of close friends. Rosalie was the flower girl, scattering petals down the aisle with the kind of enthusiastic chaos that made everyone laugh. Carol cried. Robert made a toast about second chances. Derek Chen from work gave a speech about how he'd never seen Sienna smile until Ethan came into her life. She used to be terrifying. She's still terrifying, but now she's also happy. It's weird, but good. Sienna couldn't argue with that. They honeymooned in Maine, just 3 days, because that's all Rosalie's therapy schedule could accommodate, and it was perfect. They walked on the beach, ate too much lobster, and let Rosalie collect shells that they'd find in coat pockets for months afterward. On the drive back to Boston, Rosalie asked, "Are we a real family now?" "We were always a real family," Ethan said. "The wedding just made it official." "Good, I like being a family." "Me too, baby. Me too." Spring came again. A year since Rosalie had first opened her eyes. 2 years since Sienna had confronted Ethan about turning down promotions. It felt like a lifetime ago and yesterday all at once. Rosalie was thriving at school. She had friends. She was reading at grade level. She still got tired easily and sometimes needed to use her wheelchair, but she was living a life that looked remarkably normal from the outside. The fund Sienna had created had helped 47 families so far. She'd increased it to $20 million and showed no signs of stopping. Heart Capital was still successful, still growing, but Sienna had learned to delegate. She had a life outside the office now, a husband who challenged her, a stepdaughter who made her laugh, a purpose that went beyond profit margins. One evening in May, the anniversary of Rosalie's first steps, they went back to that ice cream place in Charlestown. Rosalie got chocolate with sprinkles again. Ethan got coffee. Sienna got vanilla. "Some things never change," Ethan teased. "Some things don't need to change." Rosalie swung her legs under the table, independent and alive. "Can we go to the park after this?" "Sure," Ethan said, "if you're not too tired." "I'm not tired. I can do anything." She couldn't, not really. There were still limitations, still challenges, still days when the brain injury made itself known in frustrating ways. But she believed she could do anything, and that belief was enough to make it almost true. They went to the park. Rosalie played on the swings while Sienna and Ethan sat on a bench watching. "You know what I realized?" Sienna said. "What?" "I used to think power was about control, about having enough money and influence that nothing could touch me. But real power is this. Sitting on a park bench watching a kid who shouldn't be alive laugh on a swing set. That's the only thing that actually matters." Ethan took her hand. "Took you long enough to figure that out." "Better late than never." Rosalie called out, "Daddy! Sienna! Watch me go higher!" They watched. They cheered. They lived in the moment that they'd all fought so hard to reach. Later that night, after Rosalie was asleep, Sienna stood at the window of their bedroom looking out at Charlestown. Ethan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How different my life is from what I planned." "Is that good or bad?" "It's everything." She turned to face him. "I spent 30 years building a fortress. And then you and Rosalie walked in and showed me I'd just been building a very expensive prison. You set me free. That's very dramatic. I'm a dramatic person. You married me anyway. I did. Best decision I ever made. They stood there together, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of grief and ambition, and learned that love wasn't about having it all figured out. It was about showing up when things were hard, about choosing each other every day, about building something real from broken pieces. Rosalie would have challenges ahead. Ethan would always carry the grief of losing Jenna. Sienna would always be too controlling and too ambitious and too afraid of vulnerability. But they'd face it together. And that made all the difference. Because in the end, the story wasn't about a billionaire CEO who learned to care. It wasn't about a single father who found love again. It wasn't even about a little girl who woke up from 3 years of darkness. It was about 3 people who learned that you can't control everything. You can't prevent pain. You can't protect yourself from loss. But you can choose to love anyway. You can choose to show up anyway. You can choose to believe that broken things can heal, that impossible things can happen, that the strongest thing you'll ever build isn't an empire. It's a family. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, love chooses you back. In a bedroom down the hall, Rosalie slept peacefully, dreaming of gardens and running and all the things she'd do tomorrow. In Charlestown, in Boston, in a house that used to be empty and was now full of life, a family rested. And that was enough. That was everything.